Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm reviewing all of Paul McCartney's albums, and I'm looking today at the second Beatles album with the Beatles, which came out in 1963. For new viewers, here's a reminder of my scoring system. Each track is scored out of 10, how much I like it, from 1 up to 10, which is reserved for absolutely out of this world and brilliant songs. Most of the tracks I review will be somewhere between 4 and 7, 7 being very good, some pushing up into this sort of elite zone at the top. I then work out an average mark for the whole album, and this enables me to compare album by album for different artists. There are 14 tracks on With the Beatles, and quite a few of these are actually new to me, so it was enjoyable looking at these. They're not all original tracks. In fact, George Martin was quoted as saying this is still a collection of their songs, rather than an album which has a particular theme or concept. So let's have a look at the first one, It Won't Be Long. Now, I should mention that along the way, I'm going to be taking into account an article in the New Musical Express, which rated all of the Beatles songs down from 185 right down to number 1. I haven't read this before my rating, so I do my ratings first, but I will be comparing what I think with the experts from the NME. Track 1 is It Won't Be Long, written by John and also with a vocal by John. He's waiting for his girl to come back. Here I am sitting all on my own. And we're kind of picking up a fairly common theme here from John. This idea of rejection in relationships, this idea of perhaps being a bit of a loner and not finding the ideal person. So that sort of slightly sort of melancholic, introspective feel is quite welcome and gives the tracks a little bit greater depth. There's a furious opening here. You have some really interesting effects on my speakers, at least, of the two different parts coming out of two different speakers. It starts with the chorus. There's some double tracking of the vocal here, which I'm not entirely sold on. I like to hear just one voice singing at once, but it's interesting. The verse is short. It reminds me slightly of the structure of She Loves You, which of course we will be getting to in time. It's a lively track, but a little forgettable. I think the verse is nice, the backing is nice on that, but not a classic melody for me. Still, I would rate it as a fairly good song and give it 5. That song, by the way, was rated by the NME as the 73rd best Beatles song. Track 2 is All I've Got to Do. This again was written by John with a vocal by John, and it kind of in the style of one of his heroes, Smokey Robinson. He loved that Motown sound, didn't he? This is a straight out love song. All I have to do is call you. And it seems to work. It's quite an effective song. It's got a slow start. The beat picks up nicely in that. It's okay. Maybe nothing special, not particularly memorable, but a pleasant listen all the same. I'm going to rate it as fairly good again and give it 5. NME rated this as their 99th best Beatles track. Track 3 is All My Loving, by Paul and with a vocal by Paul. Apparently he wrote the words first on this, and the melody was mainly written on the piano, which is interesting. He was involved at the time in a relationship with Jane Asher, apparently, and this song delves into the pain of separation, but it also has this optimistic feeling, this confidence that there will be a good resolution in this relationship. It goes straight into the vocal, as quite a few of these early Beatles songs do. It's a simple but very effective verse. This is a confident love song with a romantic message, the sort of message that people can identify with. It's a fine vocal by Paul. There's a delicious guitar instrumental in it as well, and delicious drumming from Ringo, as we've come to expect. I'm rating this as a excellent song. I'm going to give it 8 marks out of 10. Interestingly, NME rated this as the 9th best Beatles song of all time, so they put it really high. Track 4 is by George. It's Don't Bother Me, also with the vocal by George. Maybe some idea of this desire for privacy, this desire for wanting to withdraw from public life. I've been left on my own, I need to get her back. So there's still that sort of romantic tinge to this whole thing. There's a very 60s feel to the melody, and of course it came out in the 60s, but it kind of does identify it with that time. The verse is quite intriguing, but overall the melody is perhaps not that exciting, especially on the refrain, I'll never be the same, not particularly gripping, and we tend to lose interest slightly partway through the song. I'm going to rate it as average, give it 4. NME, not that keen either, rated it as one of the least impressive Beatles songs at number 172. Track number 5 is Little Child, written by Paul and John and with vocals by John. It's about a sad and lonely boy who wants a girl to give him a chance, a fairly common theme on this album. Little child, won't you dance with me? Have pity on me, come and dance with me. Nice harmonica start to this. Fairly simple lyric, isn't it? There's a good lively beat to it. It's very danceable. It's good fun. I'm going to rate it as a fairly good song and give it 5. NME were less impressed. Actually had this almost at the bottom of their chart, number 177. I think it's worth a little bit more than that. Track number 6 is a cover version of Till There Was You, with Paul taking the vocal. This was a 1950s show tune by Meredith Willson and appeared in The Music Man. And it was also covered by Peggy Lee. It's a soft ballad. It features the dueling classical guitars of George and John. Very effective, skillful playing, got to say. And at such a young age to play so well is really impressive. George's got a guitar solo as well. The vocal is actually really gorgeous, and it shows how varied the repertoire of the Beatles could be. For me, it's a fine choice of song. It's a pleasant cover. I'm going to rate this as a good song and give it 6. Track number 7 is Please Mr. Postman. Now this is a cover version of a song, a Marvelette song from the Motown stable, 1961, also covered in 1975 by the Carpenters, of course, very successfully. Now some of the critics have said this is the only cover version that the Beatles have done that's as good as Twist and Shout. It's certainly a very effective cover version of this one. It's got a dramatic opening, a brilliant opening actually, with clapping, the vocal backing echoes coming in, very well arranged. We've got some double track vocals on this, which I don't always enjoy that. I quite like to hear just one voice singing, but again, that's over to your particular taste on that. John is obviously really enjoying the vocals on this one, really going for it. This whole thing's got great momentum, I think, as well. And I've got to say, it's an excellent choice of a cover version. You can't stop singing along. It's a good song, and they've done a really fine version of this. So I'm going to rate this as a very good track, give it 7 out of 10. We're going to move on to track number 8. This is another cover version, this time of Chuck Berry's hit Roll Over Beethoven from 1956. Nice little story about this. Chuck Berry's sister Lucy was a keen piano player. They had a piano in the house. She was playing classical music all the time. He literally wanted to roll over out of the way so he could get some rock and roll going on the piano. So lovely story that. Told Tchaikovsky the news, it says in the lyrics. So this is about rebellion. It's about wanting rock music to replace classical music. Don't know about you, I enjoy both actually. I enjoy lots of different types of music. Got an exciting guitar intro, then the whole thing starts to rock. Now, unfortunately, the vocal on this from George is not very exciting. It doesn't seem to me to be anyway. I don't know what you think about this. I get the feeling this might have been done at kind of the end of a long day's recording session. I don't know if that's the case or not. But it's a bit lifeless, it's a bit flat, and it kind of lacks the energy of maybe Twist and Shout. I was hoping for that sort of vocal on this one, and it's a little bit on the boring side. The instruments on this are much better than the vocal, I feel. I would compare it, if you've ever heard Elton John's version of Johnny Be Good on the Victim of Love album, again, not one of my favourite covers that. It's kind of in the same ballpark. There's a much better cover version of this by ELO, which you may have heard. So for this one, I'm going to rate this as average and give it 4. Track number 9 is Hold Me Tight, written mainly by Paul, vocal by Paul. They tried this for the first Beatles album and decided to record it again for this one, apparently. John later described it as a pretty poor song. Apparently it was influenced by the Shirelles as well, one of their favourite groups. The lyric for this is very shallow, this one. It's like, tell me I'm the only one. It doesn't really get much more than that, and it's quite repetitive. Having said that, it's a fairly engaging refrain. The harmonies are well done. The driving rhythm from the guitar is pretty good as well. So I reckon I would say this is a fairly good song and give it 5 out of 10. Enemy rates this as the Beatles' 158th best song, so they've got it fairly low. Track 10 is You Really Got a Hold on Me. This is another cover version of a song by the Miracles. Vocals shared by John and George. It's written by Smokey Robinson, who I know was one of the heroes of Paul and John at the time. They're showing their admiration. And it's good to hear some solo singing in this rather than double tracking. Although some of the vocals are shared, and it's almost like sort of them doing it together at times. My Love Is Strong Now is a lovely line that's delivered well by George. So who's sharing the vocal, isn't he? So it's a decent cover version without being a classic. I reckon this is good, and I'm going to give it 6 marks out of 10. For track number 11, Ringo takes the vocal for I Want to Be Your Man. Originally a song that John and Paul wrote for the Rolling Stones, who did release it first. It's a simple 4-chord song. And to say the lyrics aren't up to much might be an overstatement. They're almost meaningless. It's just repetitive over and over again. I want to be your man, and a little bit of variation on that. And it's delivered in almost like a community singing. So many voices all at once singing this together. I would have preferred, a particular person taking a lead vocal on this. We do hear a bit of Ringo, but not perhaps as much as we could have done. It's quite ragged and loose, the version of it, but it's still interesting actually, and there's obviously a lot of enthusiastic playing going on. So if we overlook the lyrics, it's still a fairly good song, which I'd give 5 to. Enemy, a little bit more impressed with this one, rating it as 139th on the Beatles list. Track 12, Devil in Her Heart. Originally, it's another cover by Ricky D. And was recorded in Detroit by the Donies, a particular group there. George is taking the lead on this and sounds pretty good when he's allowed to sing on his own rather than having others in there with him. It's a pretty trivial love song. It's very much of its time. It doesn't really say an awful lot. Having said that, it's pleasant. The drumming is particularly enjoyable on this. It's an average song. It's an average cover version. I'll give it an average 4. Track 13, Not a Second Time, mainly written by John, lead vocal by John. Paul said this one was influenced by Smokey Robinson again. John is feeling quite sort of wounded on this. He doesn't want to be hurt again. Again, we're seeing that vulnerable side, which does add a little bit of depth to the lyrics on this one. Nice bit of piano solo on this one. George Martin contributing there. It's got an interesting melody and harmony. And we're starting to see this invention, aren't we, in the lyrics? Just a little bit more in the lyrics and in the melody. It's not predictable, this one. And that's what makes it quite interesting for me. Although it's lyrically fairly modest, it does dig deeper into that emotional experience. So it's quite an interesting deep cut, this one. I'm going to give it a fairly good 5. NME rated this as 175, so they weren't very impressed. Last track, number 14, is another cover version, Money brackets That's What I Want. John taking the lead vocal on this. This is a rhythm and blues song by Berry Gordy and Janie Bradford, and was the first hit on the Motown label. Famously covered in the 70s by a band called Flying Lizards. You may have seen that version. Got a bit of piano on here from George Martin. It's a strong, heartfelt vocal from John on this one, actually. Sort of vocal we could have done with On Roll Over Beethoven. There's some very curious harmonies going on in the mix as well. They're worth listening to. There's lots of energy about this. Of course, it's a rather strange topic in a way. I suppose it's exposing selfishness, people who are obsessed with money and think that kind of money buys you happiness. And of course, we know from later on the Beatles that money can't buy you love, of course. So quite a nice juxtaposition of songs there. Anyway, I'm going to rate this as a good recording, actually. Give it 6. When we total up those marks, we get a total of 75 marks for 14 tracks, giving us an average of 5.36 marks per track. I've now reviewed 5 Paul McCartney albums. Let's see what's at the top so far. Well, All My Loving there is coming in at second place at the moment, along with the song Early Days from his new album. They both got 8. We've got a 7 here from Please Mr. Postman as well. I really enjoyed that track. So that's coming in there within the top 20. So moving down through these are my ratings. Again, nothing lower than a 4 at the moment, which I've got as average. So there's 1 or 2 from this album here, Don't Bother Me, Roll Over Beethoven and Devil in Her Heart. But most tracks on the album scoring pretty well. So these are my ratings for the 5 albums I reviewed so far. New still at the top, followed by Egypt Station, with the Beatles coming in now at 3, just ahead of Please Please Me, with London Town in 5th place. But obviously a long way to go. Well, I've had my say on this. Now, what do you think? What's your favourite track on this album? And what do you think of the album as a whole? Obviously, they're still doing a lot of cover versions at this stage. I'm looking forward to a 100% original Beatles album, which I'm sure I'll be counting very soon. So thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to follow my Paul McCartney project. I'm also doing an Elton John project and an ABBA project. So lots of things going on. And I really appreciate your feedback at all times. If you disagree with me, please feel free to. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.